in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and, to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has both personally and acting through his agents and subordinates misled the Congress and the citizens of the United States about a threat of nuclear attack from the nation of Iran. The National Intelligence Estimate released to Congress and the public on December 4, 2007, which confirmed that the government of the nation of Iran had ceased any efforts to develop nuclear weapons, was completed in 2006. Yet the President and his aides continued to suggest during 2007 that such a nuclear threat was developing and might already exist. National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley stated at the time, the National Intelligence Estimate regarding Iran was released, that the President had been briefed on its findings in the last few months. Hadley's statement establishes a timeline that shows the President knowingly sought to deceive Congress and the American people about a nuclear threat that did not exist. Hadley has stated that the President, quote, was basically told, stand down, and yet the President and his aides continued to make false claims about the prospect that Iran was trying to build a nuclear weapon that could lead to World War III. This evidence establishes that the President actively engaged in and had full knowledge of a campaign by his administration to make a false case for an attack on Iran, thus warping the national security debate at a critical juncture and creating the prospect of an illegal and unnecessary attack on a sovereign nation. Even after the National Intelligence Estimate was released to Congress and the American people, the President stated he didn't believe anything had changed and suggested he and members of administration would continue to argue that Iran should be seen as posing a threat to the United States. He did this despite the fact that the United States Intelligence Agency had clearly and officially stated this was not the case. Evidence suggests that the Bush administration's attempts to portray Iran as a threat are part of a broader U.S. policy towards Iran. On September 30, 2001, then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld established an official military objective of overturning the regime in Iran, as well as those in Iraq, Syria, and 4 other countries in the Middle East, according to a document quoted in then Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith's book, War and Decision. General Wesley Clark reports in his book, Winning Modern Wars, being told by a friend in the Pentagon in November 2001 that the list of governments that Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz planned to overthrow included Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Sudan, and Somalia. Clark writes that the list also included Lebanon. Journalist Gareth Porter reported in May 2008 asking Feith at a public event which of the 6 regimes on the Clark list were included in the Rumsfeld paper, to which Feith replied, all of them. Rumsfeld's aides also drafted a second version of the paper as instructions to all military commanders in the development of campaign plans against terrorism. The paper called for military commanders to assist other government agencies as directed, to encourage populations dominated by terrorist organizations or their supporters to overthrow that domination. In January 2005, Seymour Hersh reported in the New Yorker magazine that the Bush administration had been conducting secret reconnaissance missions inside Iran at least since the summer of 2004. In June 2005, former United Nations weapons inspector Scott Ritter reported that the United States security forces had been sending members of the Mujahideen al-Haq, MEK, into Iranian territory. The MEK had been designated a terrorist organization by the United States, the European Union, Canada, Iraq, and Iran. Ritter reported that the United States Central Intelligence Agency had used the MEK to carry out remote bombings in Iran. In April 2006, Hirsch reported in the New Yorker magazine that U.S. combat troops had entered and were operating in Iran, where they were working with minority groups, including the Azuris, the Baluchis, and the Kurds. In April 2006, Larissa Alexandrova reported on Raw Story that the U.S. Department of Defense was working with and training the MEK, or former members of the MEK, sending them to commit acts of violence in southern Iran in areas where recent attacks had left many dead. Raw Story reported that the Pentagon had adopted the policy of supporting MEK shortly after the 2003 invasion of Iraq and in response to the influence of Vice President Richard B. Cheney's office. Raw Story subsequently reported that no presidential finding and no congressional oversight existed on MEK operations. In March 2007, Hirsch reported in the New Yorker magazine that the Bush administration was attempting to stem the growth of Shiite influence in the Middle East, specifically the Iranian government and Hezbollah in Lebanon, by funding violent Sunni organizations without any congressional authorization or oversight. Hirsch said funds had been given to, quote, 3 Sunni jihadist groups connected to al-Qaeda, unquote, that, quote, wanted to take on Hezbollah. In April 2008, the Los Angeles Times reported that conflicts with insurgent groups along Iran's borders were understood by the Iranian government as a proxy war with the United States. Among the groups the U.S. DoD is supporting, according to this report, is the Party for Free Life in Kurdistan, known by its Kurdish acronym, PJAK. The United States has provided foodstuffs, economic assistance, medical supplies, and Russian military equipment, some of it funneled through non-profit groups. In May 2008, Andrew Coburn reported on Counterpunch that President Bush, 6 weeks earlier, had signed a secret finding authorizing a covert offensive against the Iranian regime. President Bush's secret directive covers actions across an area stretching from Lebanon to Afghanistan and purports to sanction actions up to and including the funding of organizations like the MEK and the assassination of public officials. All of these actions by the President and his agents and subordinates exhibit a disregard for the truth and a recklessness with regard to national security, nuclear proliferation, and the global role of the United States military that is not merely unacceptable, but is dangerous in a commander-in-chief. In all these actions and decisions, President George W. Bush has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as President and Commander-in-Chief, and subversive of constitutional government, to the prejudice and the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, President George Bush, by such conduct, is guilty of an impeachable offense warranting removal from office.